What do you think should be the proper income tax rate?
Well, the best would be zero.
I want to make the announcement that I am here today to release a plan that I have for balancing the budget and cutting in the first year $1 trillion.
My approach is slightly different, where I think all for less taxes and less regulations. We recognize this. But I emphasize the fact that you have to know why we have a recession and why we have unemployment before you can solve the problem. And the financial bubbles are created by excessive credit and stimulation by the Federal Reserve. And then you have bubbles and you have to have a correction. This stimulus creates excessive debt and malinvestment. As long as you don't correct that and you maintain the debt and the malinvestment, you can't get back to economic growth again. Unfortunately, so far, what we have done is we have not liquidated the debt. We have dumped the debt on the American people through TARP funding and as well as the Federal Reserve. So the debt is dumped on the people. And what did we do? We bailed out the people that were benefiting during the formation of the bubble. So as long as we do that, we're not going to have economic growth. We did the same thing in the Depression. The Japanese are doing it right now. So it's time we liquidate the debt and look at monetary policy and then, of course, lower taxes. And I would like to do in the first year, cut $1 trillion because that is the culprit, big spending and big government.
There's been a lot of talk about our problems that we're facing, but they're worldwide, and the big problem is debt. Debt has just been drowning all of us. I think our debt is too big, our government is too big, and that we have to recognize how serious the problem is. A lot of people will say, well, cutting $1 trillion in 1 year, that sounds radical. But you know, I operate on the assumption that the radicals have been in charge way too long. Our national debt today is going up $4 billion every day, and that's unsustainable.
First of all, the IRS. I'm for getting rid of the whole damned institution. What about you?
I'm with you, and I have something I've introduced over the many years. It's called the Liberty Amendment. And it gets rid of the 16th Amendment, gets rid of the IRS, but it also prohibits after 3 years, the federal government can't participate in anything that is designed for the private sector to take care of, and it's not authorized in the Constitution.
If you care about your children, you'll get the federal government out of the business of educating our kids. In 1980, when the Republican Party ran, part of the platform was to get rid of the Department of Education. By the year 2000, it was eliminated, and we fed on to it. Then we, as Republicans, added No Child Left Behind. So the first thing a president should do is the goal should be set to get the government out completely, but don't enforce this law of No Child Left Behind. It's not going to do any good, and nobody likes it. And there's no value to it. The teachers don't like it, and the students don't like it. But there are other things that the federal government can do, and that is give tax credits for the people who will opt out. We ought to have a right to opt out of the public system if you want.
Get rid of the subsidies. You subsidize illegal immigration, you get more of it.
Get rid of welfare. Get rid of
all the welfare benefits.
Health care for...
Absolutely.
So if someone's illegal and they show up at the hospital and they're injured, the hospital should do what?
Be charitable and have no mandates by the federal government. Catholics want to take care of their offering to help a lot of these people. We want to punish them in some of these, reform bills. I'm not for that. But we wouldn't have so many there if they didn't know they were going to get amnesty. You promise them amnesty, promise them that no sweat, you can get medical care and free education, automatic citizenship, food stamps, and Social Security. You're going to get more of it.
Israel attacked a nuclear reactor in 1981. Almost the entire U.S. Congress voted to condemn that act, and you were one of the few Republicans who stood up and said that Israel should not have to answer to America for how she defends herself. Why shouldn't Israel be allowed to defend herself in any way she sees fit without listening to the dictates of the United States?
Right. I remember that vote very clearly because I was criticized, and the spirit of the moment was we have to condemn him for doing this because it was a violation of the sovereignty of Iraq and this sort of thing. So to me, it was Israel's business. So I was voting for their independence. And I think this is a big difference in the way I look at Israel. I think Israel should be treated as an independent nation and not a puppet of our state, because right now what they have is they depend on us for military and they depend on us for money. And if they want to have a peace treaty, they have to ask us. If they want to defend their borders, they have to get permission. But I think what some people fail to understand is Zionism is based on two basic principles, independence and self-reliance. So those are two very important issues. And you know, I think it was interesting just a few months ago when Netanyahu was speaking before the Congress, he said very boldly that Israel can defend themselves and Israel does not need American troops to defend that country. He did not expect American troops. Does that mean we shouldn't be friends with Israel? No, we should treat them as our best friend. You know, we should be trading with them and going back and forth and facilitate friendship, which we do. But that doesn't mean that we should take over their country. I think they sacrifice too much. And besides, just think of all the money that we have spent trying to buy friendship. The best example would be Egypt. We've given Egypt over the years $40 billion so they won't attack Israel. And I guess some people say, well, that was a good investment. But how did it end up? It ended up with the people turning against Mubarak. And now they have a government in power that is more Islamic radical, and they're less friendly to Israel.
President Obama has talked about Resolution 242 in Israel, pretty much telling them they have to go back to their 67 borders. Your thoughts on President Obama's dictate?
Well, being a non-interventionist, I believe that we shouldn't tell Israel what to do. They should decide where the borders are, and I think it's wrong. I certainly wouldn't dictate to Israel where their borders should be, and they should work it out with their neighbors.
You supported Israel in 1981 when they attacked an Iraqi nuclear reactor. Do you support today the right of Israel to attack Iran, Iraq, or any other nation in its defense?
Yeah, I think the conditions are very similar, and if they believe it's in their national security interest, that should be their decisions and not ours.
You point out that the $3 billion we give to Israel annually makes no sense when we give $6 billion to Israel's enemies that surround them. The billions, as you pointed out earlier, that we spent in Egypt obviously didn't help Israel much less the United States. And many Israeli leaders really resent having to take dictates from the United States that's attached to this money.
It is true. One time I made a statement that their neighbors, the Arab neighbors, got twice as much as Israel got. But somebody did a fact check on me, and they said I was wrong. It was 7 times as much. So, but it depends on how you measure it, I guess. So we do a lot. So if you cut out all the aid to everybody, actually Israel does better than the rest. They actually have more strength because we weaken the others because we send less weapons to the other countries.
Let us finish with something that's of the utmost importance to Republicans right now, beating Barack Obama. Now, a lot of Republicans love Ron Paul's economic message, and they have questions about your foreign policy. When it comes to beating Barack Obama, which we all want to do, we need to get that guy out of the White House. And poll after poll, a majority of Americans agree with you on foreign policy more than any of the other presidential candidates. If you'll permit me, this is from The Atlantic's Connor Friedersdorf, writing for The Atlantic. Quote, remember when Paul belonged to the minority in Congress that opposed the Iraq War? Now 62% of Americans say fighting the Iraq War was a mistake. You know the Republicans who criticized Obama for presiding over the end of America's military presence in Iraq? Well, like Paul and unlike Obama, 78% of Americans support full withdrawal. And in Afghanistan, another country that Paul wants to leave, 2/3 of Americans want to see troop levels reduced. No other Republican presidential candidate does well with independent voters. This is about 20% of the electorate, the people who decide any election, other than you. And you are the only Republican running for president that agrees with the American majority, apparently, on foreign policy. Does this make you the best Republican presidential contender to beat President Obama in the general election, the fact that you were the most in sync with Americans on foreign policy?
I would like to believe that if we have a freer society, it will take care of blacks and whites and everybody equally because we're all individuals, and to me that is so important. But if we had equal justice under the law, I think it would be a big improvement. If we had probably a repeal of most of the federal laws on drugs and the unfairness on how blacks are treated with these drug laws, it would be a tremendous improvement.
Congressman Paul.
A system designed to protect individual liberty will have no punishments for any group and no privileges. Today, I think inner city folks and minorities are punished unfairly in the war on drugs. For instance, blacks make up 14% of those who use drugs, yet 36% of those arrested are blacks, and it ends up that 63% of those who finally end up in prison are blacks. This has to change.
In fact, Rosa Parks is one of my heroes. Martin Luther King is a hero because they practice the libertarian principle of civil disobedience, nonviolence. Libertarians are incapable of being a racist because racism is a collectivist idea. You see people in groups. A civil libertarian like myself see everybody as an important individual. It's not the color of their skin that is important, as Martin Luther King said. What is important is the character of the individual.
Congressman, that's what scares me the most about Obamacare. It does increase the coercive power of the feds. Is that what worries you the most?
Well, there's no doubt about it. But yes, that's a main thing. But I know the consequence of allowing governments to do that, to coerce us into programs like this, it diminishes the quality. That means that you can expect, and you already mentioned that doctors are quitting and fewer will want to go in. So the quality of care, if that's the goal, they destroy everything. They destroy our freedoms of choice. It costs a lot more, and it destroys the quality. And they still argue that they're the humanitarians. That's what galls me, is the fact that they take the moral high ground, and then we who believe in freedom and liberty and good quality care and know how to get prices down, then they paint us as uncaring.
But you have to stop with force. Once government uses force to mold behavior or mold the economy, they've overstepped the bounds and they violated the whole concept of our revolution and our Constitution.
I think the federal war on drugs is a total failure. You can at least let sick people have marijuana because it's helpful, but compassionate conservatives say, well, we can't do this. We're going to put people who are sick and dying with cancer, and they're being helped with marijuana if they have multiple sclerosis. The federal government's going in there and overriding state laws and putting people like that in prison. Why don't we handle the drugs like we had alcohol? Alcohol's a deadly drug. What about the real deadly drugs are the prescription drugs? They kill a lot more people than the illegal drugs. So the drug war is out of control. I fear the drug war because it undermines our civil liberties. It magnifies our problems on the borders. We spend, like, over the last 40 years, $1 trillion on this war. And believe me, the kids can still get the drugs. It just hasn't worked.
But as an OB doctor, let me tell you, life does begin at conception. I think what I'm most interested in is the recognition of the value of human life. If you don't have high respect for human life, you cannot have respect for liberty. What I don't understand is the argument that says it's the woman's body, she can do whatever she wants. And I, agree with that, except when it comes to another life. I think your house is sacred too. Nobody should come in your house. No cameras, nothing. But you can't kill your baby in your crib. So there is a limit. The principle of the argument is you have a right to your life. It's your body. It's your baby. And I just lost my boyfriend, and he doesn't want it, and I don't want it, and I can't take care of it. I'm going to get rid of it. That's not a civilized approach to society. But on the issue of marriage, I think marriage should be between a single man and a single woman, and that the federal government shouldn't be involved. I want less government involvement. I don't want the federal government having a marriage police. I want the states to deal with it if they have to, if they need to. But if you didn't even need the states, really, why do we have to have a license to get married? Why don't we just go to the church? And what other individuals do, why can't we permit them to do it? Whatever they call it, that's their problem, not mine. Just so nobody else forces their definition of marriage on you. That is what we have to prevent. So I would say less government would be better. If you have to have regulations, let the state governments do it.